Hi, my name is Anna Bradley, and I am a local nature awareness mentor and herbalist. So I'm really excited to talk to you today a little bit more about Lewis and Clark and the Core of Discovery, and more specifically about the mapping and the wayfinding they did in order to travel across country and to make journals and maps of what they saw and who they met. And so I know that you've been learning a bit about Lewis and Clark in the past, and so I'm really excited to bring a little bit more information to you today about the exciting journey they had, also known as a harrowing journey because there was a lot of adventure, there were some scary things and exciting things, and they met a lot of amazing people, including over 50 different Native American tribes along the way. And so Lewis and Clark and their team were some of the first white Europeans to cross country and to go into what was called back then the Louisiana Territory. It's to be known that the lands are occupied and continue to be occupied by the indigenous people of the areas. And there's over 50 tribes that they connected with and spoke with and had really positive experiences with these folks. And Lewis and Clark and their team started this journey in 1804, and that's a long time ago. Right now, what year is it? It's 2021. And so if we think to 1804, that's the 1800s. So 100 years from 1804 to 1904 is 100 years. 1904 to 2004 is another 100 years. That's 200 years, and now it's 2021. So their journey was over 200 years ago, which means there was a lot of things then that they didn't have then, that weren't invented, like the internet or telephones or even electricity. And so they were doing all of this work by using pieces of paper, pens, which were then called quills because they were using feathers that they dipped into ink to make the maps. They were using really cool equipment like compasses and telescopes and other implements of mappings like sextants and other things like that I don't have to show you today, but they're really important map making tools. But of course they had their journals, and journals are so important to record their findings and to record the maps and to record really neat things like fish and other species that they had never found before, even though many people knew about these species because they lived with them and ate them. So today we're going to specifically talk about maps and map making, and especially how Lewis and Clark and their team used maps to understand, this is Furball, to understand the area that they were traveling through. And Thomas Jefferson was the president at the time, and he had asked Lewis and Clark to start to take this journey so that they could map and find a way, a water passage to the Pacific Ocean. And so Lewis and Clark and their team put together a bunch of people. I think there was about 27 men. So they had a man named York, who was an actual slave who was owned by Clark, and he became very important on the journey to help them navigate through the crazy country that they were going through. And then they also ended up with a trapper and his wife, wife's name is Sacagawea. And I'm sure we'll talk more about her, she's incredibly important too for this journey. But today we're talking about the map making, and the map making is very fun and exciting because this is one of the biggest reasons they went on this journey, was to understand the terrain. So really, what are maps? Well, maps are really a drawing of an area, and so it helps us to understand where we are in the world. So if you're sitting there in your house or wherever you are right now, how do you have an idea of where you are in relation to everything else in the world? So they made all these maps so that we could understand where all the rivers are, where all the mountains are, where all the valleys are, and where the ocean is compared to where they started way inland in the U.S. And this is the Missouri River. So this is an actual drawing that Clark drew. So Clark was the map maker. And he used, like I showed before, like the compasses and the quill pens to draw this map in the field. So we're going to look at this map today, and we're actually looking at a river. And it's a little bit hard to see because there's no colors on this particular map. But what I'm going to show you here is there's arrows. And there's an arrow here, and there's an arrow here, and those arrows point the direction that the water is moving. And within that, they drew features. And then little pools of water here. It's actually a little bit difficult to read because their writing is in cursive, and a lot of times we don't know how to read cursive anymore. So this is Clark's actual handwriting on this map. But you'll notice here that there is A, B, C, and D. And A, B, C, and D all indicate a part on the map. And this is one way that they use as a legend. And a legend basically is a part of the map that shows you the symbols of what things mean. Because maps can be so detailed, there can be so many things on the map that it's going to be hard to read. And the points of maps is to make it easy to read, to understand where you are. And so Clark made this legend, and all he did was make a letter, and he put a letter A here, and he wrote about what letter A is about, and then he put the letter A there. So we know that this part right here is what that description says. And I can't read it upside down. It's already hard to read as it is. But I'm just showing you an example of what a legend looks like. And B is somewhere on here. Oh, B is way down here. So he described what B was, so that he didn't have to write on the map all this detail here. Instead, he could write it here and make this part really clear and open so that we could read it really well. So something that they keep in mind, you know, like we mentioned back then, is that this trip happened way over 200 years ago, and so they didn't have the things then that we do now, like internet or email or airplanes to come grab them. And so when they finished their journey, when they finally made it to the Pacific Ocean, they couldn't just email back all of these maps that they found and all of the important information that they collected over the 8,000 miles that they traveled. So they had to carry all of this back on rivers, on over rough terrain, and rain and snow and all the weather conditions that you can imagine. They had to carry all this back and hope that they would make it back and give it to Thomas Jefferson, the president, so that they could use it for the future. And so that's a big responsibility, to carry all of your work, your years of work with you, and hope that nothing happens to it. So that's a big deal. So next we're going to talk about another map. And this map is a map of the Columbia Great Falls. So the Columbia, if you know, in Oregon, at the very northern end of Oregon, there's a big river called the Columbia River. And that's the river that they were hoping to reach, because that river led them to the Pacific Ocean. And so here on this map, we actually have a little bit more color. Isn't this interesting, the color of this map? It's sort of this tan, but then there's some darker browns in here. And here you can kind of almost see this blue, and I'm curious about what colors they used. Was it colored pencils? I'm not sure what they used back then. But you can see here all these arrows indicate the direction of the currents of the river. And so in here, that's not river because that's not blue. So that's that tan brown color. So there's all these kind of islands within this river on the Columbia. But one thing I wanted you to really pay attention to is this funny looking symbol right here. It's a really funny looking symbol. What is that? It kind of looks like an arrow, but it's fancier than that. And it's pointing somewhat off this way. So you can take a closer look at that. So I want to tell you about this because this is incredibly important for map making. And in order to make maps and in order to understand how to navigate on the land, you have to know the directions. And do you know about north, south, east, west? So the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. And that's really important to know because guess where they were going? They were going to the ocean, and where we are on our continent in Oregon, the ocean is in the west. And so this arrow, though, actually points to the north. And so every single map, every map that you make and every map that you look at has to have an arrow to show you which direction is north on the map. So when you are outside and you're looking at a map to make sure you understand where you are on the landscape, you know that if you look where north is on the arrow, that north is always on top. And so right here in my house, I know that north is that way. And so if I were pretending I was right here somewhere on this landscape up in the Columbia River to the north of us, I would be making sure that I held the map like that because that way is north. Now this is just a simple arrow pointing to north, but on a lot of maps there's something called a compass rose. And a compass rose looks something like this. It's really kind of beautiful and they're really fun to make. But these are incredibly important tools to put on maps because that's how we understand where we are in relation to the world. So on top we see north, N. That stands for north. And then we move over here, we move sunwise, that's east, that's E, south, and west. And one really fun way to remember our cardinal directions is never eat soggy waffles. Never eat soggy waffles. And that's one fun way to remember our directions. And so we also need to remember that the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. And so on these maps that we were showing that Clark was making, he didn't make a really, really fancy compass rose. He just made a little beautiful arrow that points to the north so that we knew which way to navigate on the map. So we're going to look at another map, and this map is actually describing in detail some really amazing things that they had to do in order to make it across this land to get through. And so what this map is detailing, I first wanted you to take a look and see if you could find that arrow that points to north. Can you find that in there? Yep, so it's not the full compass rose, but it's this right there. So we know that this is the up part of the map, so we hold the map where this is up. And this arrow is pointing to north, so north is about like that on this map. So what this map is showing is that this is another falls that they had to go through, and they could not use their canoes to go down these falls because it would have been way too dangerous. And so this happened often on the trip and this is what happens when you are in the backcountry and you don't have the ability to get over rivers and creeks without bridges and things like that. And it's a fancy word called portage. And portage basically is that you have to port or carry your way around something to get around something that's too dangerous or too difficult to cross. So they could not cross the river at the falls. So they came in, and this is where we see here, he writes portage right here. So this dotted line all the way along here is where they had to go across so that they did not, because they could not go through the falls because it was too dangerous. So not only did they have to walk across these things, they had to take their canoes across really bumpy, hilly, rocky land. And in order to do that, they had to actually make wagons out of scratch in order to get these canoes because they're so heavy. And these people making this journey, can you imagine going miles and miles every single day, either in a canoe or walking and not eating a whole lot? So at this point in their journey, they're very tired. And so they created wagons so that they could port their canoes across the land so they could get around the falls to get to the other side and have a safe passage. So the final map I wanted to share with you today is the end of their journey. And this map shows exactly why they wanted to get to where they are. So right here is they finally made it to the Pacific Ocean. So they went all along the Columbia River and finally made it to the mouth of the river. And the mouth of the river is where a river runs into the ocean. And so this map shows where they are at the ocean, at the mouth of the Columbia River. And so once again, I'm going to have you find that north arrow. Yep. So this is north. So this is the top of the map, and this is the way we're going to hold it. And this actually shows what they did. So this right about here where this long cursive line is showing is this is where they encamped in the winter of 1805, and they stayed right here next to a Chinook village. And once again, the Chinook people are the people who have been in this area of the world near Astoria, Oregon since time immemorial. And the Chinook people were here and had interacted with Lewis and Clark and their team. And so they stayed right here in this encampment for 9 days. Right here is Cape Disappointment. So this is a very famous cape that they named, that if you go to this area near Astoria, Oregon, you will see all of this. This is all still here. And I wanted to make note that you can see now that the blue of the ocean is really vibrant. So for whatever reason, Clark decided to color this really clear blue so we can see that the water is here and that the land is here. So I wanted to give you all an idea of what the whole map looks like. So this is the entire map of the United States of America. And this map, Furball's helping us, shows us the entire journey that Lewis and Clark and their team took of the core discovery. So they started way over here in St. Louis. And this whole trail shows the route that they took all the way through Nebraska, through South Dakota, up through North Dakota. and back through here. And so this is where they split off. This is the two different things, and I can look over here to explain what that is. But they went all the way through Montana, all the way into Idaho, into these, and all the way through the Continental Divide, and all the way through Idaho, and up here until they were finally about to hit the Columbia River. And so here we are. This is Oregon. This is our state right here, and this is how far north. So if we're in Eugene, we're down here, right about down here. And so they were all the way up here near Portland, up at the Columbia River, and they followed this river all the way down through to Astoria, to the mouth of the Columbia River, and into the Pacific Ocean. This is where their journey ended. But remember, they had to go back too. They had to make the entire journey backwards all the way through. And so I want to also show you that this here is an example of a legend. And this legend has numbers and a name. So each number shows you what's over here. So let's look at number 53. This is Salt Works in Seaside, Oregon. And then we have another legend over here. Because this map is so detailed, they actually created two different legends to explain all the different sites that were named or seen along the way. So on 29, let's see if I can find 29. 29 right here, way over here, that last map that I showed you where they stayed for the winter, says begin building Fort Clatsop December 7th, 1805, and leave Fort Clatsop on homeward journey. They left back home in 1806. And so they created Fort Clatsop right here, and that fort is still there today, and you can go visit it. And so this shows you how long this journey took these folks, over 2 years, to go across the land where there are no roads and there are no planes or trains that take them, all by foot and canoe. So now we're outside and we can look around us and see all the amazing features that are here on the landscape. And features are the things that don't really move, like mountains or trees, as long as they don't fall over, roads and trails and rivers. And those are the things that we really want to capture on our map so that we know where we are in relation to the landscape. So behind me, you can see Spencer's Butte. And that is a really big feature, and it also helps us understand and orient where we are in town. So if I'm walking around town and I realize, wait, which direction should I go? I can look around and be like, wait, where's Spencer's Butte? Because I know that Spencer's Butte is always south of Eugene. So we know that south is that way because Spencer's Butte is there. And if we keep looking around this way, to the north, to the east, and pan around to the north, we can see more of the town to the north. We can see through those Doug fir trees. Just through there's the Coburg Hills, and the Coburg Hills is to the northeast of Eugene. And if we keep facing almost all the way due north, we can see College Hill just in front of us. And if we keep panning more to the west, you can see way out in the distance the Willamette Valley, and extends all the way north to Portland. So now I want to show you how to use the basics of a compass. And here's the compass right here. And you can see that we've got a red arrow that points to north. We've got a green S for south, a green E, let's see, move that, a green E for east, and a green W for west. So we've got our compass rose right here on our compass. But in order to use it, we need to make it flat. And so compasses are used, they are magnetic. And so the arrow that points to north is drawn to magnetic north, not the North Pole, but the magnetic north. And that's the hot magma underneath the earth that creates and moves and causes anything metal to point towards that. And so right now, you can see that there's a little white tip at the top of that arrow, and that's the arrow that I want to look at. And right now it is pointing directly due north. So I want you to make sure that when you are holding the compass, you're holding it flat in your hand, and that you don't have anything metal on you, because if you have something metal on you, that white point is going to swing around and point at you because you're now the metal thing, not magnetic north. And so moving this ever so slightly, and that is north. And this way is pointing behind me is south. And like I said before, Spencer's Butte is nearly due south. And so that's how we can use a compass in a really basic way of just understanding where north and south is. So now I'm going to draw a map from just being right here in my setting. And so once again, remember how I said that north always goes on top. And we learned that north is that way. So I'm going to orient my map that north is this way, that way is north. And I'm going to put myself right here in the middle. So I'm going to pretend that that little dot is me. I am sitting here on this bench. So in front of me, there are quite a few big Doug fir trees. And so I'm going to make little circles to show that there are Doug fir trees to the north and northeast of me. And I'm going to also make a legend. And right now I know at this point that the dot equals me, the rectangle equals a bench, and the circles equals trees. And so when I'm looking north this way, I see that the trees are that way, right about like that. But if I look to the east, there's actually a road behind me. And so I can kind of turn this way, but I'm going to keep my map facing north so that I can remember where I am in relation to the map. And so I've got a road that comes from the east and goes right in front of my bench. And then there's another road that goes to the south, and I'm going to draw it off down the hill that way, where I can't see it anymore. And it goes down over here. So I'm going to draw little lines like that just so I know that that's a road and not a trail or a river or something like that. And in my legend, I'm going to make sure I understand that that equals a road. Now I've got a shrub right here, so I'm going to make a little like squiggly cloud to say that that's a shrub. Turn it back that way. There's more shrubs that way and a building over there. So I'm going to make a bunch of shrubs that go along like that. More shrubs. And then I'm also going to make, let's see, what should my symbol be for a building? So let's do another long square, and then I'll just put a roof on it. So in my legend, we'll say that this equals a building. So you can see now that I have a really simple map that shows features that I can see around me so that I can understand which way things go. So I've got roads, I've got me at the bench, I've got Doug fir trees, I've got shrubs, and I've got a building. And that is a really basic way of showing how to draw a map of your area. And that's almost exactly how Lewis and Clark and their team drew maps to talk about what they saw in the environment around them. So now I challenge you to make your own map. And this map can be in your backyard, in your front yard, in a nearby park. And just find a really fun spot that has like a tree that you can sit next to. And then just in the area just around you, just like we did, I encourage you, or I invite you to make your own map. And you can ask a parent to help you decide which way is north if you don't know, or maybe a caregiver has a compass or something for you to help you use. But the easiest thing to do is to draw a map, and you can put your dot of where you are in the middle of your map so that everything around you can draw. And remember to make little symbols of what you see. And you don't have to use the same symbols that I use. You can make all those sorts of different symbols just as long as you name what that symbol is so that we understand. I want to say thank you so much for joining us today on this mapping adventure and learning about Lewis and Clark and the core of discovery. I learned actually a lot more things that I never knew about Lewis and Clark and their journey. And I hope that you have fun finding ways to map and look at your environment in a new way to understand what features are around you so that you can better understand your place in the world.